On the evening of Friday, March 31, 1922, 6 people were living at an isolated farmstead in Upper Bavaria, Germany. The place was known as Hinterkaifeck. It stood near the village of Grobern, in what is now the municipality of Weidhofen, roughly 70 kilometers north of Munich. The farm was not a village in itself. It was a single rural property, set back from the road, close to fields and woodland. By the evening of Tuesday, April 4, 1922, all 6 residents had been found dead. They were Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia Gruber, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel. Victoria's 2 children, young Cecilia and Joseph. And the newly arrived maid, Maria Baumgartner. Records showed that the killings most likely took place during the night of March 31 into April 1, 1922. Investigators believe that the first 4 victims were attacked near the barn and stable area, and that the final 2 were attacked inside the living quarters. The case became one of Germany's best-known unsolved crimes. It was investigated repeatedly. It produced formal police reports, witness statements, rumors, later reviews, and many theories. But it never produced a conviction. No person was tried for the murders at Hinterkaifeck. The case was officially treated as unsolved. The files were reportedly closed in 1955, though investigators continued to take statements decades later. The last known interviews connected to the case took place in 1986. This account follows the records carefully. Where a detail was established by physical evidence, it will be described that way. Where a detail came from a witness, it will be stated as a witness account. Where investigators reconstructed events from the scene, it will be framed as what investigators believed. Hinterkaifeck had been built around 1863. By 1922, it consisted of a long, single-story residential and stable building, with a barn attached at an angle. A continuous loft or attic space ran over parts of the house, stable, and barn. The people living there were connected by family and by work. Andreas Gruber was the older farmer. Sources give his age as either 63 or 64. His wife, Cecilia Gruber, was 72. Their daughter, Victoria Gabriel, was 35. Victoria's husband, Karl Gabriel, had been reported killed in the First World War on December 12, 1914. Victoria's daughter, young Cecilia, was 7. Her son, Joseph, was 2. The last resident, Maria Baumgartner, was not a family member. She was the new maid. Sources give her age as either 44 or 45. She arrived at Hinterkaifeck on Friday afternoon, March 31, 1922. Records indicated she had only just begun working there. The family background was difficult and important to the investigation. In 1915, Andreas Gruber and his daughter Victoria had been convicted in court in connection with an incestuous relationship said to have occurred between 1907 and 1910. Andreas received a prison sentence of 1 year. Victoria received a shorter sentence of 1 month. Later, after Joseph's birth in September 1919, questions about Joseph's paternity became part of the wider family conflict. One man connected to that conflict was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor and local village official from Grobern. Schlittenbauer had been involved with Victoria after the death of his first wife. Records showed that he was treated as a possible father of Joseph, though statements around paternity shifted over time. In September 1919, Schlittenbauer reported Andreas Gruber to authorities in relation to incest allegations, then later withdrew or altered parts of his position. Investigators later considered this history as possible motive context, but it never became proof of murder. Hinterkaifeck was also thought to be financially secure. The family owned land, livestock, and valuables. Neighbors believed they kept money in the house. This became relevant after the murders, because investigators initially considered robbery, but later found that money and valuables had not simply been cleared out. In the months before the crime, several strange or troubling incidents were reported. A former maid, Crescens Rieger, had left the farm months earlier. Later accounts associated her departure with fear, unusual noises, or a belief that the place was haunted. Those claims became famous, but they should be treated carefully. They came through later reporting and witness memory rather than through preserved physical evidence. In mid-March 1922, Andreas Gruber reportedly found a Munich newspaper on or near the farm. He did not remember buying it. According to later summaries, no one nearby subscribed to that paper, and the postman was not able to explain it as a delivery mistake. Investigators later treated this as one of several signs that an unknown person may have been near the property before the murders. A few days before the killings, Andreas reportedly told others that he had found footprints in fresh snow. The prints led from the woods toward the farm, but he said he found no prints leading away. He also reported that a lock on the motor house had been broken, but that nothing had been stolen. Around the same period, the family reportedly missed a house key and heard footsteps in the attic. These incidents were not reported to police before the murders. That matters. By the time investigators learned of them, the people who had noticed them were dead, the snow was gone, and the scene had already been entered by many others. The reports remained important, but they could not be tested in the same way physical evidence could have been tested on the day they occurred. By Thursday, March 30, 1922, records and later statements suggested that Andreas Gruber had already spoken to others about the footprints and the broken lock. In one later summary of Inspector Rian Gruber's early report, Andreas was said to have described footprints from two men leading toward the farm. He reportedly refused offers of help and did not contact the local gendarmerie. Investigators later considered whether someone had already entered, watched, or hidden somewhere on the property. The attic became important in this theory. When police examined the site after the murders, they found hay laid across part of the attic floor. They also found shifted roof tiles and depressions in the hay. Records suggested this could mean someone had moved quietly above the rooms or observed the farmyard from above. That interpretation was never conclusive. Later reviewers noted that some signs in the attic could have other explanations. It was possible that the attic had been used before by members of the household. It could not be proved that an intruder had lived there for days or weeks, despite how often that version is repeated. On Friday afternoon, March 31, 1922, Maria Baumgartner arrived at Hinterkaifeck. Her sister escorted her there and then left after a short stay. Records suggest Maria's sister was likely the last outsider known to have seen the household alive. There is no confirmed record of the exact hour when the murders began. Investigators believe the killings happened late on March 31 or during the early hours of April 1. The most common reconstruction places the first attacks in the barn or stable area. The physical arrangement of the bodies guided the reconstruction. 4 victims were found in the barn area: Andreas Gruber, Cecilia Gruber, Victoria Gabriel, and 7-year-old Cecilia Gabriel. Investigators believe they were attacked one after another near the transition between stable and barn. The exact order remains uncertain. Some later reconstructions suggested Victoria may have been first. Other accounts list a different order. The safe conclusion is that the 4 were killed in the barn or stable area, likely within a limited span of time, and likely by a blunt farm tool found on the property. Medical examination showed severe head injuries. The main weapon was later identified as a ruthaw, a type of mattock or farm hoe. It belonged to the farm. The tool itself was not recovered immediately. It was found later, in February 1923, during demolition of the farm. Investigators believe that after the attacks in the barn, the killer or killers moved into the living quarters. There, Maria Baumgartner was killed in her room, and young Joseph was killed in the bedroom area where he slept. Forensic and medical records from the case are incomplete. No full official autopsy report is known to survive. The surviving documentation includes a telephone note from April 7, 1922, and later official summaries. The scene also suggested that the killer did not leave immediately. Records showed that after the murders, the cattle were fed or tended. The cows were reportedly milked or watered. Bread in the house had been eaten. Meat in the pantry had been freshly cut. The fireplace or oven was used. Investigators believed this meant that someone remained at the property after the killings, or returned to it. It did not prove exactly how long that person stayed. On Saturday, April 1, 1922, coffee sellers Hans and Edward Skyrovsky came to Hinterkaifeck to take an order. A witness account stated that no one answered their knocks at the door or window. They walked around the yard, noticed the machine room gate was open, and left. That same day, young Kazilia was absent from school without excuse. She was also absent on Monday, April 3, and Tuesday, April 4. On Sunday, April 2, 1922, the residents of Hinterkaifeck did not attend church. In a rural Catholic community, their absence was noticed. A witness named Michael Plockel stated that on the night after the murders he passed the farm and saw smoke from the chimney. He said an unknown person approached him with a light, making it difficult for him to see clearly, and that he continued on his way. Records indicate that this report was not fully investigated at the time. On Monday, April 3, the postman Joseph Mayer reportedly came to the property and noticed no visible activity. The absence remained concerning but not yet understood. On Tuesday morning, April 4, 1922, mechanic Albert Hoffner traveled by bicycle to Hinterkaifeck to repair the engine of the feed-cutting machine. According to later testimony, he was at the farm from about 9 o'clock in the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon. Hoffner stated that he found no residents. He waited for a time, then completed the repair alone. He heard the cattle and the dog, but did not see any person. After finishing, he reportedly walked around the farm again and noticed that a barn door was open, though he did not enter. His later statement became important because it placed a living outsider at the property for several hours before the bodies were discovered. It also raised questions about whether the killer had already left, whether the killer returned later, or whether the farm's signs had simply changed in ways Hoffner could not fully interpret. After leaving, Hoffner told people in Groburn that the repair had been completed and that no one at Hinterkaifeck had appeared. He spoke to people connected to Lorenz Schlittenbauer's household and also reportedly informed local officials. At about 3:30 in the afternoon, Schlittenbauer sent 2 boys to check the farm. They returned and said they had not made contact with anyone. Later that afternoon, Schlittenbauer went to Hinterkaifeck with 2 neighbors, Michael Pohl and Jacob Sigel. The 3 men entered the barn area and found the bodies of Andreas, Kazilia Gruber, Victoria, and young Kazilia. Shortly afterward, the bodies of Maria Baumgartner and Joseph were found inside the living quarters. Local police arrived around 6 o'clock in the evening. The Munich police were informed around 6:15. The first officers had a difficult task. Word spread quickly. Neighbors and onlookers came to the farm. Some entered the property. Later records showed that the scene was disturbed. Bodies and potential evidence had been moved or touched. At least some people reportedly used the kitchen. In 1922, forensic practice was less developed, but fingerprinting was already known and available. Later reviewers criticized the failure to preserve fingerprints and secure the scene more effectively. Under Kriminalober-Inspector George Reingruber, a team came from Munich. They arrived in the area during the night and began a systematic inspection in the early morning of Wednesday, April 5, 1922. The team included investigators, court officials, and police dogs. Records showed that they inspected the buildings, including the attic. They noted hay on the attic floor, shifted roof tiles, and depressions in hay. These details supported the theory that someone might have used the attic to move quietly or observe the farm, though they did not prove it. The early investigation considered robbery. This was understandable. The house had been searched or disturbed, and the family was believed to have kept money. But investigators found that a significant amount of money remained. This weakened the robbery theory. The medical examination was conducted by the court physician Johann Baptist Aumüller. Surviving records related to the body examination are dated April 7, 1922. On Saturday, April 8, 1922, authorities offered a reward of 100,000 marks for information leading to the capture or clear identification of the perpetrator. The funeral also took place on April 8 in Weidhofen. Thousands reportedly attended. The public attention around the case grew quickly, and with it came speculation. The early investigation moved in several directions. Investigators questioned itinerant workers, traveling tradesmen, local laborers, vagrants, and people with criminal records. They looked at robbery as a possible motive, then at personal motives, local conflicts, family history, and political violence. One major suspect in public discussion was Lorenz Schlittenbauer. There were reasons investigators and locals looked at him. He had a past relationship with Victoria. He was connected to the paternity dispute involving Joseph. He lived nearby. He was one of the men who discovered the bodies. Witnesses stated that after the bodies in the barn were found, he went into the house alone. It was also said that he opened a door from the inside with a key, at a time when a house key had reportedly been missing before the murders. Schlittenbauer denied involvement. He gave explanations for his actions. He later brought civil actions against people who called him the murderer, and records show he won several slander cases before his death in 1941. Investigators never proved he committed the murders. He was never charged. Another line of inquiry involved Karl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, who had been reported killed in the war in 1914. Rumors developed that he had survived and returned. But other soldiers reportedly confirmed seeing Karl dead during the war. The theory remained unsupported. The investigation also examined the Gump brothers, Adolf and Anton, connected in reports to violent political activity after the First World War. In 1951, after a deathbed statement by their sister, Anton Gump was taken into custody. Adolf had already died in 1944. Anton was released, and in 1954 the case against him was discontinued because participation could not be proved. The murder weapon itself was found in February 1923, when the farm was demolished. It was a blood-stained mattock hidden in the attic or floor space near the chimney area. Records stated that human hair adhered to it, and that a protruding repair feature corresponded to injury patterns. By then, however, too much time had passed for fingerprints to be useful. The demolition also marked the disappearance of the physical place itself. Hinterkaifeck was not preserved as a crime scene. It was taken down less than a year after the murders. The land later returned to agricultural use. The case was made harder by missing records. Large parts of the case material were later destroyed during a bombing of Augsburg in the Second World War. The victims' skulls, stored for examination, were also reportedly destroyed. Many later witness statements were taken decades after the event, reducing their reliability. In 2007, 15 police academy students reviewed the case using modern investigative principles. Their report credited parts of the original inquiry as careful, especially given the era, but criticized the failure to secure forensic evidence and follow certain leads more fully. They concluded that a definitive identification of the murderer was almost certainly no longer possible. There was no verdict in the Hinterkaifeck case. No one was convicted. No confession was legally established. No surviving physical evidence now appears capable of resolving the matter. The official case was closed in 1955, but interest never ended. Retired investigators and researchers continued to review the surviving records. The case remained a subject of books, documentaries, articles, and careful archival work. The reason it was never solved is not one single failure. It was a combination of factors. The crime was discovered 4 days after it likely occurred. The scene was contaminated before a full forensic examination. Tracks in snow were reported only after the person who saw them was dead. A possible missing key was never recovered in a way that could prove who had it. The weapon was found too late for useful fingerprints. Witness statements were inconsistent. Many records were later destroyed. And every suspect theory depended, in the end, on inference rather than proof. Investigators believed the killer knew enough about the farm to move through it effectively. Evidence suggested the killer had time after the deaths. Records showed that the person responsible was never legally identified. That is where the case rests. Hinterkaifeck is often remembered for its mysteries: the footprints in the snow, the attic noises, the missing key, the quiet farm where work seemed to continue after everyone inside was dead. But at the center of the file were 6 people living in a remote place in early spring, in a rural community where absence was noticed slowly. A child missing school. A family missing church. A mechanic repairing a machine while no one came out to meet him. Neighbors walking over in the late afternoon of April 4, 1922, expecting perhaps illness, delay, or some ordinary explanation. The records do not allow a final answer. They show a household with conflict in its past. They show warnings that were not reported in time. They show an investigation that gathered many statements but lost the chance to preserve decisive evidence. They show suspicion falling on neighbors, laborers, former soldiers, family connections, and strangers. They show a case that remained open in memory long after the official file had gone cold. More than a century later, the quiet question is not only who entered Hinterkaifeck, but what small, ordinary sign might have changed the course of that final night if someone had understood it in time. On Sunday, November 29, 1970, in the hills outside Bergen, Norway, a family found the body of an unidentified woman. Records showed that nearly every item around her had been stripped of labels, marks, or papers that might have given her a name. She became known as Isdalskvinnen, the Isdal woman. This is the case file: a woman, several false identities, a careful trail through Norwegian hotels, and an investigation that remains unresolved. Bergen is Norway's second-largest city, set between mountains, water, and narrow valleys. One of those valleys is Isdalen, near Mount Ulriken and the reservoir at Svartediket. In late November 1970, the area was cold, wet, and quiet. The woman found there was never identified. Police records gave her a case number. Public memory gave her a name, the Isdal woman. Investigators believed she had traveled through Norway and parts of Europe using multiple aliases. Hotel records showed different names, different claimed birthplaces, and false passport details. Witnesses remembered a reserved, well-dressed woman who spoke poor English, used some German, and may also have spoken Flemish. Forensic analysis confirmed that she died from a combination of carbon monoxide poisoning and a large quantity of the sedative phenymal. Soot in her lungs showed she was alive when the fire began. Petrol traces were found at the scene. Police in 1970 leaned towards suicide, but the case was never solved, because the basic questions remained unanswered: who she was, why she hid her identity, and what happened in Isdalen between her final confirmed sighting and the discovery of her body. The confirmed trail begins in spring 1970. From March 21 to March 24, 1970, hotel records showed that a woman using the name Genevieve Lancier stayed at the Viking Hotel in Oslo. She claimed to be from Louvain. Police later connected this stay to the Isdal woman through handwriting analysis. On March 24, 1970, records showed that the same woman traveled to Bergen and checked into Hotel Bristol under the name Claudia Tielt. She claimed to be from Brussels. She stayed there until March 25. From March 25 to April 1, 1970, records showed that Claudia Tielt stayed at Hotel Scandier in Bergen. These early stays were not understood at the time. They only became meaningful after police compared hotel forms, signatures, and handwriting. After spring, the public record becomes less complete. Investigators later found traces of travel outside Norway, including Paris, but the most detailed reconstruction resumes in late October 1970. On October 29, 1970, hotel records showed that a woman using the name Claudia Nielsen checked into KNA Hotellet in Stavanger. She claimed to be from Ghent. She stayed until October 30. On October 30, 1970, she traveled to Bergen and checked into Hotel Neptun as Alexia Zarnmerches. She stayed there until November 5. A waitress, Alfhild Rains, later stated that the woman seemed elegant, self-assured, and reserved. Witnesses at hotels described her as dark-haired, composed, and guarded. Some remembered an unusual smell, later described by one witness as possibly garlic, which would have stood out in Norway in 1970. From November 6 to November 8, 1970, records showed that the woman stayed at Hotel Bristol in Trondheim under the name Vera Jarl. She claimed Antwerp as her place of origin. On November 9, 1970, she was back in Stavanger. Hotel records showed that she checked into St. Swithin Hotel under the name Fenella Lorch. She stayed there until November 18. During this Stavanger period, she visited Oscar Rortvedt's footwear store. Rolf Rortvedt, the owner's son, later stated that he remembered her clearly. He said she was a foreign woman, well-dressed, dark-haired, and careful in choosing a pair of rubber boots. She bought blue boots of a common Norwegian model. After the body was found, remains of similar boots were located at the Isdal scene. Investigators believe this purchase linked the woman in Stavanger to the unidentified body in Bergen. On November 18, 1970, records showed that the woman traveled to Bergen and stayed one night at Hotel Rosenkrantz under the name Ms. Lienhofer. On November 19, 1970, she checked into Hotel Horteheimen in Bergen under the name Elizabeth Lienhofer, claiming to be from Ostend. She stayed in room 407. Hotel staff later stated that she kept mainly to her room and appeared watchful. She paid in cash. A witness stated that she smoked South State cigarettes. Other hotel witnesses remembered that she often changed rooms after checking in, sometimes more than once. On November 23, 1970, she checked out of Hotel Horteheimen, paid her bill in cash, and requested a taxi. That taxi journey is the final confirmed stage of her movements. Investigators believed she went to Bergen railway station, where 2 suitcases later linked to her were placed in left luggage. The taxi driver was not identified during the original investigation. A later anonymous account, given many years afterward, claimed another man joined the ride, but that account remains unconfirmed. From November 23 to November 29, 1970. There is no confirmed public record of where she stayed, who she met, or when she entered Isdal. On Sunday, November 29, 1970, a man and his 2 daughters were walking in Isdal. The family found a woman's body on a rocky slope away from the main path. They had to walk back to report it, because there were no mobile phones in 1970. Police and officials arrived at the scene. Carl Halvor AAS, a police lawyer, was among the first officials there. He later stated that the area was steep and difficult, not a normal hiking path. The body was badly burned on the front. Around the body, police found burned and damaged items, clothing fragments, an umbrella, plastic bottles, remains of rubber boots, a liqueur bottle, jewelry, a watch, and other personal effects. Records showed that manufacturing labels had been cut out of clothing. Distinctive marks had been scraped from objects. Even labels on bottles had been removed. Investigators believed that someone had deliberately removed anything that could identify her. On November 30, 1970, the Bergen police requested assistance from Kripos, Norway's National Criminal Investigation Service. Investigators began checking missing person reports, hotels, transportation records, foreign police notices, and local witnesses. 3 days after the body was found, police located 2 suitcases at Bergen railway station's left luggage office. A fingerprint on a pair of sunglasses in one suitcase matched the body. That confirmed the luggage belonged to the Isdal woman. The suitcases contained clothing, shoes, wigs, cosmetics, a comb, a hairbrush, foreign currency, Norwegian money, maps, timetables, non-prescription glasses, and a notepad. 5 100 Deutsche Mark notes were found hidden in the lining of one suitcase. The luggage also contained a shopping bag from Oscar Rortvedt's footwear store in Stavanger. Again, records showed that identifying marks had been removed. Labels were cut out. Scratches had been made on items that might have shown origin, owner, or seller. Even the prescription label on a tube of eczema cream had been scraped away. The Stavanger shopping bag became a major lead. Police went to the shoe store. Rolf Rortvedt identified the woman from memory and described the boots he sold her. Investigators then used the Stavanger lead to trace her to St. Svithin Hotel, where the name Fenella Lorch appeared. That discovery opened the hotel phase of the investigation. Police went from hotel to hotel, comparing descriptions and registration cards. In 1970, foreign guests in Norway filled out hotel forms with name, address, passport number, and signature. These forms became central evidence. Handwriting experts compared the hotel forms with notes and records found in the luggage. They concluded that the same woman had used multiple aliases. Belgian police later checked the claimed identities and passport details. Records showed the identities were false. Investigators then examined the notepad found in the suitcase. At first, the entries appeared coded. Over several days, police determined that the letters and numbers corresponded to travel movements: Oslo, Bergen, Stavanger, Trondheim, and Paris. Investigators believed the notepad was a travel log. This finding was important because it gave structure to her movements. It did not, by itself, prove espionage. The Cold War setting, the aliases, the wigs, and the coded-looking notes created suspicion, and Norwegian security services did take an interest. But public records do not establish that she was a spy. The autopsy was conducted at Keddie's Institute in Bergen. Forensic analysis confirmed that the woman had taken a large amount of phenymal, a sedative hypnotic drug. Roughly 50 to 70 pills were found in her stomach, and the evidence suggested they had been taken in more than one dose in the hours before death. Many had not fully dissolved or entered the bloodstream. Forensic analysis also confirmed carbon monoxide in her blood and soot particles in her lungs. This showed that she was alive while breathing smoke. A bruise was noted on the right side of her neck, but records did not establish whether it came from a fall, a blow, or another cause. A Kripos forensic technician later stated that petrol was identified in the soil beneath the body. This supported the conclusion that petrol had been used to start the fire. But it did not answer who applied it or how the final sequence unfolded. The medical conclusion was careful: death was assumed to be from a combination of phenymal poisoning and carbon monoxide poisoning, with fire injuries possibly contributing. By late December 1970, the investigation had slowed. Bergen police leadership publicly leaned towards suicide. Yet the case was not solved. The woman still had no name. Her movements in the final 6 days were unknown. The removed labels, false identities, and unexplained scene continued to trouble several investigators. On February 5, 1971, the Isdal woman was buried at Melendal Cemetery in Bergen. The funeral was Catholic. Police officers attended. There were no relatives present. She was buried in a zinc coffin so that, if her identity was ever discovered, her remains could be moved. Years passed. No family came forward. The case remained in Norwegian memory as an unresolved death, and in 2016 it was reopened. NRK began reviewing the original case files in cooperation with West Police District and Kripos. Preserved forensic material was located, including tissue samples and the jaw and teeth that had been retained because of her distinctive dental work. On November 1, 2016, forensic scientists obtained a near-complete DNA profile from preserved tissue. The samples had not been stored with modern DNA testing in mind, and there had been concern that the material might be degraded. But analysis of tissue from different organs produced consistent results, suggesting the profile was usable. In May 2017, extended DNA analysis indicated that the woman had European ancestry. Kripos issued an updated Interpol Black Notice, asking police forces internationally for help identifying her. That same year, isotope analysis was performed on her teeth. The technique studied chemical signatures in tooth enamel, oxygen and strontium, which can reflect the water, food, and geology of the places where a person grew up. The results pointed most strongly toward Germany, France, Belgium, Luxembourg, or nearby border regions. Swedish experts revised the age estimate to approximately 36 to 44, born around 1930. These findings narrowed the search. They did not identify her. The official outcome is unresolved. The Isdal woman has never been identified. No person has been charged. No conviction exists. The 1970 investigation produced a probable cause of death. Modern forensic work added important facts. DNA suggested European ancestry. Isotope testing suggested a childhood connected to Germany, France, or Benelux. Dental analysis suggested she was likely around 40. These findings reduced the field of possibility, but they did not provide her name. She was an unidentified European woman, traveling under false identities, found dead in Isdal on November 29, 1970. The evidence suggested careful concealment of identity. The evidence did not establish why. The Isdal woman's case endures because it is built from ordinary records that refuse to become an ordinary story. Hotel forms. Suitcases. A shopping bag. A pair of boots. A notepad. Teeth kept in an archive. Tissue preserved long enough for science that did not exist when she died. Each item moved investigators a little farther along the path. Each one stopped before the final answer. Her aliases gave dates, but not a life. Her luggage gave possessions, but not a home. Her DNA gave ancestry, but not a family standing at a graveside. Her final known day, November 23, 1970, remains separated from the discovery on November 29 by 6 quiet days that records have not filled. And so the case rests where it has rested for more than half a century, not entirely silent, but still unnamed. Who was the woman who moved so carefully through the world, and left behind everything except her name? On August 21, 1968, near Signa, west of Florence, 2 people were found shot inside a parked car. Over the next 17 years, 7 more couples would be killed in rural places around Florence. Records showed a recurring pattern: secluded locations, a small-caliber firearm, and restrained but distinctive post-mortem injuries to some female victims. Forensic analysis confirmed that the same type of .22 caliber Winchester ammunition linked the series. The case became known as Il Mostro di Firenze. The Monster of Florence. The countryside around Florence in the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s was dotted with quiet roads, wooded pull-offs, and rural parking places. Young couples often used these areas for privacy. The murders did not happen in central Florence, but in the surrounding province: Signa, Borgo San Lorenzo, Scandicci, Calanzano, Montespertoli, Giagali, Vicchio, and San Casciano in Val di Pesa. The first known double murder occurred on Wednesday, August 21, 1968, in the area of Castelletti di Signa. The victims were Barbara Lacci and Antonio Lo Bianco. Lacci's young son, Natalino, was present in the back seat and survived. At the time, investigators treated the case as a domestic killing. Lacci's husband, Stefano Mele, confessed, recanted, changed his account, and was eventually convicted. That conviction would later become one of the most complicated parts of the entire case. For several years, the 1968 murders appeared to be closed. Then, on September 14, 1974, a second couple was killed near Borgo San Lorenzo. In 1981, 2 more double murders followed. By then, investigators believed they were no longer looking at isolated crimes. The key link was ballistic. Forensic analysis confirmed that bullets and cartridge cases from several crime scenes had been fired by the same weapon, believed to be a .22 caliber Beretta pistol, using Winchester long rifle ammunition marked with the letter H on the base. The firearm was never recovered. On the night of August 21, 1968, Barbara Lacci and Antonio Lo Bianco were parked in a car on a rural road near Signa. Records showed that several shots were fired at close range. Both adults were killed. Lacci's son, who was about 6 years old, survived. In the early hours of August 22, 1968, he reached a nearby house and asked for help. Accounts differed over exactly how he got there. Some records suggested he walked through the dark alone. Other accounts raised doubts because of the distance, the terrain, and details about his clothing. This remains one of the unresolved questions inside the first case. Stefano Mele was questioned soon afterward. He eventually confessed, then gave inconsistent statements, naming other men connected to his wife. In 1970, he was sentenced to prison. The conviction became final in the early 1970s. At that point, the Signa case seemed legally settled. But in 1982, after several more double murders, investigators returned to the 1968 file. Forensic analysis found that bullets and cartridge cases preserved in the Mele case file matched the weapon used in the later murders. If the same gun had fired in 1968 and again in later years, then either Mele had not acted alone, or the gun had passed to someone else. On Saturday, September 14, 1974, Pasquale Gentilecore and Stefania Pettini were in a car near Borgo San Lorenzo, in the Sagginal area. They were found the following morning. Records showed that both had been shot. Pettini had also been injured after death. The details were noted by investigators because they suggested an offender who was not only killing, but returning to the female victim after the shooting. A witness stated that Pettini had mentioned being frightened by an unknown man before the murder. These accounts were investigated, but no arrest resolved the case. On Saturday, June 6, 1981, near Massiano di Scandicci, Giovanni Foggi and Carmela De Nuccio were attacked in a parked car. Records showed that the man was shot first. De Nuccio was also shot, then removed from the vehicle. Investigators documented post-mortem injuries to her body that matched the pattern seen in 1974. The pattern was recurring. A local man came under suspicion after discussing details of the murders before they had been publicly released. He was arrested and held for several months. Then another double murder occurred while he was in custody. That new crime cleared him as the offender. On Thursday, October 22, 1981, the next victims were Stefano Baldi and Susanna Cambi. They were attacked near Travaia di Calanzano. They had been engaged and were expected home that evening. Records showed the same firearm pattern. A witness reported a suspicious car leaving the area. Composite sketches were produced, but they did not lead to a confirmed identification. By late 1981, investigators believed they were dealing with a serial offender targeting couples in isolated rural places. On Saturday, June 19, 1982, Paolo Minardi and Antonella Migliorini were attacked in Bacaiano, near Montespertoli. This crime unfolded differently. Records showed that Minardi was still alive when found. He was taken to hospital, but he died without regaining the ability to identify the attacker. Investigators believed the killer may have been interrupted. After this murder, police reviewed earlier files. A marshal recalled similarities between the 1982 scene and the 1968 Signa murders. On July 20, 1982, bullets and cartridge cases from the 1968 case were located in the old case file. Forensic analysis confirmed that the same weapon had been used. This discovery redirected the investigation. Stefano Mele had been imprisoned during later murders, so investigators had to consider whether someone else had used the weapon in 1968, or whether the gun had passed from one person to another. This became known as the Pista Sarda, the Sardinian Trail. The name came from the Sardinian background of several people connected to Barbara Lacci and Stefano Mele. Investigators examined men who had known Lacci. Some were arrested or investigated. But the theory weakened when further murders occurred while suspects were already in custody. On Friday, September 9, 1983, two German students, Jens Uwe Rusch and Horst Wilhelm Meyer, were killed at Giagali, near Florence. They were staying in a Volkswagen van. This crime was unusual because both victims were male. Investigators believe the offender may have mistaken one of them for a woman because of long blonde hair and build. The same firearm was used. The 1983 murders undermined the active Sardinian Trail arrests. If the men under suspicion were imprisoned, they could not have committed the Giagali crime. On Sunday, July 29, 1984, near Vicchio, the victims were Claudio Stefanacci and Pia Gilda Rontini. They were found in a Fiat Panda on a rural road. Forensic analysis confirmed the same firearm pattern. A witness reported seeing a man watching the couple earlier that evening. None of the accounts produced a definitive identification. By 1984, public concern in the Florence countryside had changed daily habits. Couples were warned to avoid isolated places. Police increased patrols. Despite this, the offender was not identified. The final confirmed double murder occurred on the night of 7 to September 8, 1985, near Scopiti, in San Casciano in Val di Pesa. The victims were French tourists Nadine Mauriat and Jean-Michel Crevequevillai. They were camping in a small tent near their car. Investigators believed the offender cut or opened the tent fabric, then fired. Mauriat was killed inside or near the tent. Crevequevillai tried to flee and was killed a short distance away. Records showed that the same firearm pattern was present. A few days later, the Florence prosecutor's office received an anonymous envelope. Inside was tissue removed from Mauriat's body. This mailing was treated as direct offender communication. Other letters followed, but investigators did not regard all of them as equally reliable. After the 1985 murders, the killings stopped. That did not close the case. In the early 1990s, attention shifted to Pietro Pacciani, a farmer from the Mugello area with a violent criminal history. He had previously been convicted for a 1951 killing and later for abuse within his family. Those facts made him a person of interest, but they did not prove involvement in the monster murders. Pacciani was arrested on January 17, 1993. His trial began in April 1994. On November 1, 1994, he was convicted at first instance for 7 of the 8 double murders. The 1968 Cigna case was excluded from that conviction. This point is often misrepresented. Pacciani's conviction did not survive the appellate process. On February 13, 1996, the Florence Court of Appeal acquitted Pacciani. Later that year, on December 12, 1996, Italy's Court of Cassation annulled the acquittal and ordered a new appeal trial. That trial never happened. On February 22, 1998, Pacciani was found dead at his home. Legally, there is no final conviction against Pietro Pacciani for the Monster of Florence murders. During and after the Pacciani appeal, investigators focused on men connected to him. The group became known in the press as the Compagni di Merende, the snack companions. The phrase came from Mario Vanni, who used it while describing his relationship with Pacciani. The main defendants were Mario Vanni, Giancarlo Lotti, and Giovanni Faggi. Lotti became a central figure. He first appeared as a witness, then implicated himself and others. His statements changed over time, and critics have continued to question his reliability. Still, courts accepted enough of his account to convict. In 1999, the appeal court confirmed Vanni's conviction for 4 double murders, 1982, 1983, 1984, and 1985. Lotti's sentence was set at 26 years. In 2000, the Court of Cassation confirmed the convictions, making them final. Faggi was acquitted. Vanni died in 2009. Lotti died in 2002. Their convictions remain part of the legal record. But the murder weapon was still missing. No physical evidence conclusively placed them across the entire series. The motive was not clearly established. After the convictions, investigators examined whether unknown instigators had commissioned the murders. One figure, Francesco Calamandrei, was investigated as a possible instigator. In 2008, he was acquitted because the alleged facts were not proven. These later theories produced years of inquiry, but no objective proof established a second level of planners. Several proceedings ended in acquittals, dismissals, or archiving. In 2025, Italian reporting described DNA findings related to the 1968 case, renewing attention to the Sardinian Trail. This finding may affect how the earliest context is understood, but it does not identify the monster or settle who held the gun in later years. The legal outcome is layered. Stefano Mele was convicted for the 1968 Cigna murders, though the later ballistic link complicated the historical interpretation of the crime. Pietro Pacciani has no final conviction for the monster murders. Mario Vanni and Giancarlo Lotti were definitively convicted in 2000 for several later murders. The alleged instigator theories were not proven. The case is best described as an unresolved cold case with partial final convictions. Between August 21, 1968 and September 8, 1985, 8 couples were killed in the countryside around Florence. The record moves through rural roads, parked cars, a tent in the woods, old case files, disputed testimony, and one firearm that was never recovered. The investigation changed shape many times. First, it was a domestic murder. Then it was a serial pattern. Then it was the Sardinian Trail. Then it became the case against Pacciani. Then it became the case of the Compagni di Merende. Later, it moved into theories of hidden instigators and modern DNA review. Some facts remain steady. The dates are known. The places are known. The victims' names are known. The ammunition link is known. The legal outcomes are known. Other parts remain uncertain. Who held the gun in 1968? Who held it in 1974? Whether the same hand used it each time. Whether the later convictions described the whole truth or only part of it. Why the crime stopped after September 1985. For a quiet case file, that is where the record rests, not empty, not closed, but incomplete. If one weapon can move through 17 years of silence, how much of the truth belongs to the person who fired it, and how much belongs to the people who never explained how it passed from hand to hand? In April of 1981, in the small mountain community of Keddie, California, a family cabin became the center of a case that has remained open for more than 4 decades. The place was Cabin 28, part of the Keddie Resort, a quiet settlement near Quincy in Plumas County, surrounded by forest, railroad tracks, and the steep country of the northern Sierra Nevada. During the night of April 11 and the early morning of April 12, 3 people were killed inside that cabin. 36-year-old Glenna Susan Sharp, known as Sue. Her 15-year-old son, John Stephen Sharp. And John's 17-year-old friend, Dana Hall Wingate. Sue's 12-year-old daughter, Tina Louise Sharp, was missing from the scene. Her remains would not be found until 3 years later. The case is known today as the Keddie Cabin Murders. It remains officially unsolved. No one has been convicted. No one has been charged. What remains is a record of documented evidence, incomplete timelines, missed opportunities, renewed investigation, and a family left without a legal answer. Keddie was not a large town. It was a small resort community a few miles from Quincy, the Plumas County seat. By 1981, the resort had faded from its earlier years as a vacation stop, but it still held cabins, families, neighbors, and children moving between homes. Cabin 28 was one of those homes. Sue Sharp had moved there with her children after separating from her husband and relocating from the East Coast to Northern California. Sue was raising 5 children. John was 15. Sheila was 14. Tina was 12. Rick was about 10. Greg was 5. The family had limited resources, but by the accounts that survive, the children were woven into the small community around them. They visited other cabins. They went back and forth in a way that, at the time, seemed ordinary. On the night of April 11, 1981, not every Sharp child was in Cabin 28. Sheila planned to spend the night at the nearby Seabolt residence. Tina had also been at the Seabolt's cabin that evening, watching television. Rick and Greg were at home. A friend, 12-year-old Justin Smart, was also staying overnight with the Sharp boys. Justin was the stepson of Martin Smart, known as Marty, who lived nearby. Sheila was next door. That separation would matter. She would survive because she was not home, and by morning, she would be the one to find what had happened. The documented timeline begins earlier in the day, on Saturday, April 11. Around 11:30 that morning, Sue, Sheila, and Greg were on their way to pick up Rick from baseball tryouts in Quincy. During that trip, they came upon John Sharp and Dana Wingate hitchhiking near the mouth of the canyon between Quincy and Keddie. Sue gave the boys a ride back toward Keddie. Around 3:30 that afternoon, John and Dana were reportedly seen again in downtown Quincy. What is documented is that they were away from Cabin 28 during part of the afternoon and evening, and that at some later point they made their way back. As evening came on, the cabin settled into what appeared to be a normal Saturday night. Sheila had plans to sleep next door. Shortly after 8 o'clock that evening, she left Cabin 28 and went to the neighboring home. Sue remained with the younger children and Justin Smart. Around 9:30 that evening, Tina Sharp returned from the Seabolt's cabin to Cabin 28. She had been watching television next door. Some accounts say she asked the time before going home. This is one of the clearer time markers in the record. Tina was seen alive that evening, around 9:30, returning to her own home. Sometime between 10 that night and 1 in the morning, John Sharp and Dana Wingate are believed to have returned from Quincy to Keddie. The exact time is not firmly established. It is also not clear exactly what they saw or encountered when they arrived. Between late Saturday night and the early hours of Sunday morning, the killings took place inside the living room of cabin 28. Investigators documented that Sue, John, and Dana were attacked there. Blood evidence indicated the fatal violence occurred in that room. The three younger boys, Rick, Greg, and Justin, were in a nearby bedroom and survived physically unharmed. The precise sequence of the attack remains uncertain. Records showed that the victims had been bound with medical tape and electrical cords. Forensic summaries described knife wounds, blunt force trauma, and strangulation. 2 bloodied knives were found at the scene, including a bent kitchen knife. 1 hammer was recovered. Later analysis suggested more than 1 hammer may have been used. John was found closest to the front door, face up, his hands bound. Dana was found near him, ankles bound and linked by cord to John. Sue was found near the sofa, covered by a yellow blanket, gagged with a blue bandana secured with tape. Sue and John died from knife wounds and blunt force trauma. Dana died from asphyxiation and blunt force trauma. Sue and John's throats were cut. All 3 had sustained serious head injuries. During those same hours, Tina disappeared. She was not found in the cabin. By the morning of April 12, it became clear that the 12-year-old was missing. The next morning, Sheila Sharp returned from the Seabolt's residence to cabin 28. Later reporting cites a sheriff's dispatch call at 8:05 in the morning from Jan Albin, co-owner of the Keddie resort, reporting the possibility of a homicide. Sheila opened the door and saw the bodies in the living room. She was 14 years old. She ran back to the Seabolt's cabin for help. Word was taken to the resort lodge, where Jan Albin contacted authorities. Rick, Greg, and Justin were removed from the cabin through a bedroom window. They were alive and physically unharmed. A neighbor who briefly entered the cabin from the back to check for survivors may have inadvertently contaminated parts of the scene, though the act appeared to be done in the immediate confusion. Early accounts indicated that the 3 boys had slept through the attack. Later, Justin Smart gave statements that complicated that simple account. Under hypnosis, he reportedly described seeing 2 men in the living room and seeing Tina come into the room before being taken away. These statements are part of the documented investigative history, but they should not be treated as established fact. Justin's accounts were inconsistent, and hypnosis-based statements carry limits. The Plumas County Sheriff's Office opened the original investigation. Officers had a difficult scene, multiple victims, a missing child, surviving children who were either asleep or uncertain in their accounts, and a small community where many people knew each other. Evidence at the scene pointed to more than 1 weapon. The level of blood evidence suggested that whoever committed the killings would likely have left the cabin with blood on clothing or skin. Yet no arrest followed. Over time, 2 names became central to the investigative focus. Martin Smart, who lived near the Sharps and was Justin Smart's stepfather. And Severin John Bobaid, known as Bo, Smart's friend, reportedly staying nearby around the time of the murders, with a criminal history. Smart and Bobaid were examined by investigators. They were not convicted. They were not charged. Their names remain part of the investigative record, not a legal finding of guilt. Investigators had reasons to look at them. Smart reportedly had conflict in his marriage, and Sue Sharp was said to have been close to Marilyn Smart, his wife. Smart also reportedly told investigators that a hammer was missing from his home. Former Sheriff Doug Thomas later stated that there was not enough evidence to prosecute the suspects being discussed in renewed reporting. The case slowly went cold. For 3 years, Tina Sharp's disappearance remained one of the central unknowns. She had been in cabin 28 that night. She was not found with the others. The missing child became the missing piece of the case. In April of 1984, skeletal remains were found in Butte County, near Camp 18 in Feather Falls. Reports differ slightly on the exact date. Some give April 11, 1984, the third anniversary of the murders. The location is described consistently as a rural area roughly 50 to 80 miles from Keddie. A bottle collector found partial skeletal remains. The remains were later confirmed as Tina Sharp's, reportedly through dental comparison, with confirmation cited around June of 1984. That discovery changed the meaning of the case. Tina was no longer a missing child. She was the fourth confirmed victim. The Keddie case became a quadruple homicide. After news of the remains was reported, an anonymous caller contacted the Butte County Sheriff's Office and connected the discovery near Feather Falls to the Keddie murders, referring to the 12-year-old girl who had never been found. Later investigators considered this call significant because it appeared to connect Tina to the remains before official confirmation had been made public. A recording of that call was later found in a sealed evidence envelope during the renewed investigation. Greg Hagwood became Plumas County Sheriff in 2010. In 2013, he brought retired investigator Mike Gamberg back to organize and review the Keddie files. The renewed review began with old evidence, old interviews, and the reality that some central figures were already dead. Beau Boubade had died in 1988. Martin Smart had died years later. Whatever they knew could no longer be tested in court. Still, Hagwood and Gamberg publicly identified several items they believed were important. One was a letter Martin Smart had written to his wife, Marilyn, after the murders. A line in that letter has been interpreted by some investigators as confession-like. But interpretation is not proof. The letter was not tested in a public trial. Another was the hammer. In 2016, a man using a metal detector found a steel claw hammer with a blue handle in a pond near Keddie. Investigators said it matched the description of the hammer Smart had reported missing from his home. It was recovered and submitted for testing. No public prosecution followed. A third was the medical tape. Investigators said identifiable DNA was recovered from tape associated with the scene. In 2018 reporting, that DNA was said to match a then-living suspect. No public charge followed. A fourth was the anonymous call. Gamberg reportedly found the recording in an envelope in the case files that had not been meaningfully processed. Whether the caller had special knowledge has not been publicly resolved. Hagwood and Gamberg publicly stated they believed Smart and Boubade were central to the crime, and that living persons may have had first-hand knowledge or helped after the fact. Those statements show the direction of investigative focus. They do not resolve the case in court. The Keddie cabin murders remain officially unsolved. No one has been convicted of killing Sue Sharp, John Sharp, Dana Wingate, or Tina Sharp. What is known is limited but firm. Sue, John, and Dana were killed in cabin 28 during the night of April 11 to April 12, 1981. They were bound and attacked in the living room with knives and blunt force weapons. Tina disappeared from the cabin that same night. Her remains were found in Butte County in 1984. 3 younger children survived in a nearby bedroom. Sheila Sharp discovered the scene after spending the night next door. What is not known remains substantial. The exact sequence of the attack is uncertain. The precise time the killers entered and left the cabin is unknown. The number of people directly involved has not been legally established. The reason Tina was taken, and the path from cabin 28 to the place where her remains were found, remains unresolved. For the surviving family, the case was never only a mystery. It was a morning, a doorway, a room, and the sudden loss of a mother, a brother, a sister, and a friend. For investigators who returned to the case years later, it was a record of evidence that might still speak, if tested carefully enough, and read without forcing certainty where certainty does not exist. Cabin 28 is gone now. The resort community changed. Many people connected to the case have died. But the file remains open. After all these years, who walked into cabin 28 that night, and who still knows the truth? On Wednesday, the 26th of January, 1966, 3 children left their home in Somerton Park, South Australia, and travelled by bus to Glenelg Beach. Their names were Jane, Arna, and Grant Beaumont. They were 9, 7, and 4 years old. The trip was short, familiar, and ordinary for the time. They had made it before. They were expected to come home later that day. They did not return. No confirmed trace of them has ever been found. South Australia police have long treated the case as a suspected abduction and murder, but no one has been convicted, no remains have been recovered, and the person last seen with them has never been identified. Glenelg in 1966 was a busy seaside suburb west of Adelaide. On warm days, families travelled there for the beach, the jetty, the shops, and the lawns of Collie Reserve. Australia Day fell during the summer school holidays. The weather was hot, and Glenelg was the kind of place where children could spend the morning by the water while adults went about their own day nearby. The Beaumont family lived at 109, Harding Street in Somerton Park. Jim Beaumont was a former serviceman and had worked as a taxi driver and salesman. Nancy Beaumont was at home with the children that morning. Jane, the eldest, was regarded as responsible enough to guide her younger sister and brother on a short outing. In the mid-1960s, this was not unusual. Jane Nadar Beaumont was 9 years old. She was described as thin, with a freckled face, hazel eyes, and sun-bleached fair hair. That day, she wore green shorts over pink bathers and canvas sand shoes, and she carried towels, a purse, an airline-style bag, and reportedly a copy of Little Women. Arna Kathleen Beaumont was 7, plump, suntanned, with dark brown hair and brown eyes. She wore tan shorts over red and white bathers, sandals, and possibly a bright orange hairpin. Grant Ellis Beaumont was 4, thin, very tanned, with brown hair and brown eyes. He wore green cotton shorts over striped green bathers and red sandals. The exact time the children left home has been reported differently across sources. Some accounts placed them on a Glenelg-bound bus as early as 8:45 in the morning. Other reconstructions placed the bus trip closer to 10 o'clock. What is consistent is the larger shape of the morning. The children left Harding Street by bus, the destination was Glenelg Beach, and by late morning, witnesses were seeing them at and near the beach. By about 11 o'clock in the morning, the children were in the Glenelg area. Witnesses later placed them near the beach and Collie Reserve, a public grassed area close to the foreshore. At some point in this late morning period, several people reported seeing the children in the company of an adult man. The witnesses did not describe a scene of fear or distress. They reported the children playing. They appeared relaxed. Some accounts say the children were jumping around or over the man, and that the girls playfully flicked towels. To the people watching, the interaction appeared familiar enough that it did not immediately raise alarm. Between about 11 a.m. and noon, the man was seen near the children at Collie Reserve. He was described as tall, tanned, and thin-faced, wearing swim trunks, with fair or light brown hair. The children seemed comfortable with him. Around the same part of the morning, Jane went to Wenzel's cake shop on Mosley Street. The shopkeeper knew the children from previous visits and later reported that Jane bought food using a £1 note. That £1 note mattered. Nancy Beaumont had reportedly given Jane coins, enough for the bus and lunch. She had not given her a £1 note. The order also appeared larger than expected, and it included a meat pie, which the children reportedly did not usually buy. Police considered this one of the signs that someone else may have given the children money. 3 children left home with coins. Before they vanished, Jane paid with a £1 note. Somewhere between Harding Street and Wenzel's, the children may have received money from another person. Around noon, witnesses again reported the children with the unknown man near Collie Reserve and the changing sheds. One witness heard the man ask nearby people whether anyone had touched our clothes, or whether anyone had taken our money. The man appeared to speak as if his belongings and the children's belongings were connected. That word, our, became significant. It suggested he was presenting himself as part of the children's group. To a bystander, it may have made him seem like a relative, a family friend, or someone responsible for them. Witnesses near the changing shed saw the children waiting while the man changed. Some accounts say he helped the children dress, which struck witnesses as odd, particularly because Jane was 9 years old and old enough to dress herself. But nothing about the scene was dramatic enough, in the moment, to cause someone to intervene. By about 12:15 in the afternoon, the children and the man were seen walking away from the beach area. This is one of the last firmly repeated points in the case, the children with the unknown man, near Collie Reserve, apparently calm. After that, certainty falls away. A postman who knew the Beaumont family reported seeing the children walking alone along Keddie Road at about 2:55 in the afternoon. He said they were holding hands and laughing. But the postman later contacted police and said he may have seen them in the morning rather than the afternoon. That revision makes the sighting unreliable as a final confirmed moment. The unknown man remained central. Witnesses described him as around 6 feet tall, clean-shaven, with a long or thin face, a suntan complexion, and a slim to athletic build. He was usually estimated to be in his mid-30s. His hair was short, fair or light brown, swept back or parted to one side. His swim trunks were often described as blue or navy, sometimes with a white stripe. Police prepared a composite sketch. It showed a long, clean-shaven face and light hair swept back. The sketch was circulated widely. It prompted many tips, but no confirmed identification. What is known about the man is limited to what witnesses said they saw. He was present with the children. He appeared to have gained their confidence. He spoke to bystanders as if he belonged with them. He has never been identified. At home, Nancy Beaumont waited. When the children did not arrive, she watched for the next bus. Jim Beaumont returned earlier than expected from a work trip. When he learned the children had not come home, he drove to Glenelg to look for them. The beach was crowded. There were many families, many children, and no sign of Jane, Arna, or Grant. By evening, the matter was reported to police. South Australia police operational records show a missing report logged at 7:20 in the evening. The log recorded that the father and police had already carried out a thorough search of the beach area. Police searched Glenelg Beach and the surrounding foreshore. They checked nearby buildings, vessels, lawns, and coastal areas. By 8:40 that evening, local police had searched the Brighton foreshore, and officers also checked West Beach and Henley Beach. As night went on, the search widened. Boats, roads, rail routes, and airports came under attention as the fear of abduction grew. In the first days, investigators considered misadventure. But no clothing, towels, bags, or other belongings were found along the shoreline. The children had carried many items with them. There was no evidence of preparation for a voluntary disappearance. Grant was 4 years old. The third theory was abduction. Over time, it became the only explanation that fit the absence of the children, the absence of their belongings, and the witness accounts involving the unknown man. On the evening of the disappearance, a woman reported seeing 3 children similar to the Beaumonts near the Padawalonga boat haven. The boat haven was later drained and searched. Nothing connected to the children was found. Police questioned known sex offenders and suspicious men in the wider Adelaide area. Reports came in from across South Australia and beyond. None led to the children. In late 1966, Dutch clairvoyant Gerard Croiset became involved after public interest and private funding brought him to Adelaide. His claims drew major attention, including searches of locations he named. No evidence was found. About 2 years after the disappearance, Jim and Nancy received letters said to be from Jane and from a man claiming to be keeping the children. A meeting place was arranged. The Beaumonts went there, followed by a detective, but no one appeared. Decades later, forensic examination showed the letters were hoaxes. Improved fingerprint technology identified the writer as a man who had been a teenager when the letters were sent. Because so much time had passed, he was not charged. The investigation continued through decades of tips. Several men became investigative focuses, but none was proven responsible. Arthur Stanley Brown was one of them, a Queensland man charged in 1998 over the murders of 2 children, though never convicted because he was found unfit for trial. His face resembled some identikit images connected to the Beaumont case. But no evidence placed Brown in Adelaide in 1966, and he was 53 at the time, older than the man witnesses described. Bevan Spencer Vaughan Einem was convicted in 1984 of murdering a child and suspected in relation to other crimes. He came into the Beaumont investigation through resemblance to some descriptions and through an informant who claimed he had spoken about taking 3 children from a beach. Vaughan Einem was in his early 20s in 1966, younger than the described man. No charge resulted. Derek Percy was a convicted child killer investigated because of his history and claims that he may have been in Adelaide at the time. He was 17 in 1966, much younger than the described man. No conclusive evidence connected him to the Beaumont children. Harry Phipps became a major later focus. He was a wealthy Adelaide businessman and former owner of the new cast alloy factory. After claims from his son and from 2 men who said they had dug a large hole at the factory around the time of the disappearance, investigators examined the possibility that the children's remains might have been buried there. Phipps reportedly resembled the identikit and was said to carry £1 notes. No evidence has proven his involvement. In 2013, police searched part of the former new cast alloy factory site after ground-penetrating radar identified an anomaly. The search found nothing relevant. In 2018, South Australia police returned to another area of the site. Geophysical testing had identified a feature consistent with disturbed ground. The excavation found animal bones, rubbish, broken ceramic, shells, and disturbed soil. It did not find human remains. In February and March of 2025, a privately organized third search took place at the former cast alloy site. It removed a large volume of soil and was described as more extensive than previous digs. Again, no remains were found. South Australia police stated that the theory being pursued was not supported by available evidence. The legal status of the case is unchanged. The Beaumont children's disappearance remains unsolved. South Australia police continue to classify it as an active cold case and a suspected abduction and murder. A reward of up to $1 million Australian dollars has been offered for information. What is confirmed is narrow but important. The children went to Glenelg on January 26, 1966. They were seen at the beach and at Collie Reserve. Jane bought food at Wenzel's with a £1 note. Witnesses reported the children with an unidentified man who behaved as though he was connected to them. By evening, they were missing. No confirmed trace has ever been recovered. The Beaumont children's disappearance has endured because it contains so few fixed points and so many unanswered spaces. It is a case built around ordinary details: a bus ride, a beach, a bakery, towels on grass, children waiting near changing sheds, a mother watching for a bus that did not bring them home. For Jim and Nancy Beaumont, the case was not a symbol or a mystery. It was the loss of 3 children in one day, followed by years of searching, hoping, answering questions, and hearing theories that never brought Jane, Arna, or Grant back. Nancy died in 2019, without an answer. And after all the searches, sketches, interviews, suspects, letters, and excavations, the quiet question remains the same as it was on that summer evening in 1966, after Glenelg: where did the children go?